So after that I returned basically to Fiji, and then in 1979 I had the opportunity to go to South Africa. This was partly to see whether or not I might be interested in working there, because Anglo had an unofficial policy that to climb up the ladder for their geological people, essentially you had to do a year at some point working on the mines in South Africa, which I actually didn't mind. I thought that would be a good experience. So what I did, I combined that with another geo tour that took me around the mineral deposits of South Africa, the classic deposits, the diamonds, the Wits, the Bushveld. I hired a small car, it was a VW Golf, for about 3 weeks, and I basically worked my way from Johannesburg up to through Namakwaland, Okiep, crossed into Namibia, went to Ometes, also up to Tsumeb, where one of my contemporaries from University of Queensland, John Innes, was working. There were two manic mineral collectors during our graduate days, and that was John and myself. John was probably even more passionate than I was, so it was no surprise to me to see him working at Tsumeb. So we had a great couple of days together. He, of course, had an amazing collection of minerals that he'd gathered over 6 or 7 years of working there. And he took me into a place where they keep the better specimens to send to museums and stuff like that. And he essentially gave me a shopping trolley and he said, "You've got 5 minutes." I collected some nice specimens. Anyway, another feature of that trip was John was able to show me what was called the Dioptase cave. And there was a level in Tsumeb, I can't remember which, but it was like Fort Knox. It had huge steel bolted doors, and it was a cave about the size of a small hotel room, and the entire walls were lined with dioptase crystals.
What size?
Oh, mostly anything from fingernail size to perhaps thumbnail size. These were worth an absolute fortune, obviously, but that was an incredible experience. Do
you still have photos?
I had one piece
Okay.
that's actually in the collection. No, I didn't have photos. I had a camera at the time, but it was a small one, and I think it wouldn't have worked well underground. But John had an amazing collection, and sadly he passed away with liver cancer not much later, which was a great shame.
So he was very young.
Yes, he was. He would have been mid-30s. Oh. Yeah, it was a real shame.
Wonder what happened to his collection.
I've often wondered that.
Yeah.
He was married locally, I was told, and I did ask that question to some friends, but nobody really knows. But it would have been incredibly
Probably in
valuable.
Someone's garage in
I would hope not. I hope it found its way into an institution, but yeah. I've no way of knowing. So then I went back to South Africa. I met Roy Corrins, who was a great exploration geologist. He introduced me to some of the things they were doing at the time, geochemical things like zinc zap, most interesting. Then I went up to Messina, crossed over into then Rhodesia. It was a year before independence. Anglo had arranged for me to visit their nickel mines in Bindura, which I did.
Which is where Roy had worked, obviously.
Yes, yes, and the Great Dike.
Yeah.
Other places I went were some of the gold mines, the Commoner. I remember that very clearly. I was there for a couple of days. There was a great geologist called Martin Prendergast, and he was doing...
Always wore a cravat in the field.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Lovely chap.
Yeah, he was doing his degree, I think it was his PhD, on a mine called the Commoner. So one morning we went underground and I asked him if I could take some samples, and he said, yes, of course, no problem. So we went to one face and there was a boulder about this big on the floor, and I had my hammer and I tried to get a piece off this, and it was difficult. And the reason it was difficult, it was full of wire gold and tellurides. So I managed to take a small piece off, and I asked him if I could have that, and he said yes, that's quite okay. So that was a nice experience. I also wanted to go to Bulawayo at the time, but the pegmatites, but unfortunately it was off limits. So then I returned to South Africa, back to Fiji, and I was there for about another 2 to 3 months, and it was coming to a point where I had to make a decision as to whether I would accept a year in South Africa working on the mines. This was somewhat of a dilemma for me because I'd been working in Papua New Guinea, I'd been working in Fiji with wonderful local people, and the whole concept of apartheid was very sad for me. And so I thought really hard about it, and at the end of the day I informed them that I don't think I would fit in that situation, and I knew I wouldn't. So I said that I wouldn't be going, and I think it was somewhat of a disappointment for Anglo. It was disappointing for me, but I just didn't feel comfortable with it. And at that time, Jack Thompson was looking for people of my experience to form a specialist exploration team with AMAX.